Number four is, how do you balance your time between active office projects and self-learning? So the first thing I want to comment on here is that I'd encourage you not to view your day job, your office projects, and self-learning as some sort of binary choice. I think you should always be trying to do your day job along with some amount of self-learning. In my experience, the times when I felt the most productive and the most fulfilled have actually been the times when I have been really productive at work, and I've also been able to do something really cool and fulfilling on my own after hours. And I'm not talking about just the motivation that carries over. Like, I have a really productive day at work and I can carry that over into my personal projects, although certainly the motivation carrying over is a big thing. But I'm also talking about the learning carrying over, where the things that I'm learning at my day job carry over into the apps I'm building on my own, and vice versa. The things that I'm Googling for, or like the things that I am thinking about or learning about on my own, I can apply back inside the bubble of my company. And I think one important point here is, how are you doing the self-learning, right? What a lot of people do, which I think is totally the wrong way of thinking about learning on your own, is that they will put on a YouTube video, or they might read a blog post, and they'll basically nod their head along with the instructor and say, okay, yeah, that person is like building some app on YouTube, let me like follow along. And you're not really going to retain anything if you do that approach. What you have to do is you have to apply the knowledge that you're learning. And there are two primary ways to do that. Number one is you can explain the concept or explain that knowledge to someone else. So find a friend, find a colleague, and explain it to them. If you don't have that, find a dog or find a rubber duck and explain that concept to them. But the point is that you can't just you can't just consume content. You have to actually take that knowledge that you have and put it back out in the world. It could be just talking it through with a friend, or even better is make a YouTube video about it or make a blog post. Like, you have to be able to actually create something in order to really learn something. And unsurprisingly, the best way to create something is to actually build something with that, right? So if you're learning like a new JavaScript framework, don't just follow a tutorial, but actually build your own application, which is using that new framework that you have. That really is going to be the best way to learn something. And what I found is that when you do that, then you can take whatever new ideas you have or whatever new concepts you've learned about architecture or code style or whatever else, and you can apply that back to your day job. And it's helped me a lot to grow in a much faster way. If you think about how important is your career to you, I mean, that's kind of an obvious thing. Your career is very important to you, right? Like, it's your livelihood. It's how you spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week. So like, if you kind of think about the importance level, you might think about it as like, your career is level 100 importance. But now think about how important is your career to your company. If you work at a small startup, which has like 5 or 10 people, then I would say that maybe the importance of your career is like level 50, where they care about your career, certainly, and the success of that company, because it's so small, is tightly linked to your success. But there are a lot of things that you're going to have to do in that company which are not directly going to help you. And that's okay, right? You got to interview people, you have to do some grunt work maybe at that startup, which are not directly going to help your career. But you do that because you want the company to succeed. And so there's some kind of mismatch, but not that much. It's like level 50 importance for the company. Your career is like level 50 importance. But now if you start to think about these huge multi-thousand person organizations, like 50,000 people, you start to really get into this weird state where your career's importance to the company is like 10. It's like quite low. And the reason is because the objective of the company, there's like one mission for the company, and that mission will now get sent down to each of the sub-organizations, which have their own objectives or criteria that line up to that top level objective. And oftentimes there's going to be misalignment or tension between these sub-organizations. My point here is basically that you have to be careful about how the company you work for, they're not going to magically give you the career that you want and give you everything you want in terms of compensation or learning. You have to be in control of that. You have to be in the driver's seat. And of course, if you have a good manager and you have a good team, then that's great. You should really invest in work. You should always be investing in your work. But you also have to keep in mind that you are the person who's in the driver's seat of your own career, and you have to make sure you put yourself in a position that you can succeed. And the best way to do that is by investing in self-learning outside of work. And that sounds a little bit scary, like, or maybe depressing, because I'm basically telling you that, your day job or the company that you work for doesn't really care about you, but that's the harsh reality. Like the days of you working at a company for 30 or 40 years, they're not coming back. Like that's what happened like 20, 30 years ago. But with how fast tech changes and how quickly people change jobs, you cannot rely on your company to take care of you. And so that's why I really believe that you need to spend time doing office work, but you need to find some synergy between what you're doing in the office and your day job and what you're doing on your personal time, and figure out how you can learn more and do other things outside of your work, because that is really where you can be empowered and you can be liberated to basically do whatever you want, build whatever you want, and build the career that you want.
Well, my bigger piece of advice here is instead of focusing on the math between like, oh, is it 60-40, 50-50, 70-30, focus more on turning your self-learning into something that you actually enjoy. In short, your self-learning should not feel like work. If your self-learning feels like work, then you can't balance these two. It's impossible, because like you have actual work and then you have your self-learning, which feels like more work. Like your brain cannot handle that. So kind of speaking from like my personal experience here, I think why I've been able to do a very good job doing self-learning and side projects is because I spend my free time on things that I think are fun in the self-learning studio. And for me, that's just actually building real life Android applications that I think would help people, and of course help myself and people that are close to me. So when I work on my side projects, it doesn't feel like work. I have so much fun, like writing out this code with like absolutely no constraints, and going through the feedback people leave for me on my apps and building the features that they want. It doesn't feel like work at all to me, which is why I'm able to have very high productivity when it comes to self-learning, because it doesn't feel like work. So my biggest piece of advice here is, instead of focusing on the math, focus on how to make your self-learning actually enjoyable. Because like for me, if your self-learning is like, oh, I'm going to go back and like study for some credential or some certification, that doesn't really feel like fun to me. That seems like a very difficult thing to pile on top of your work.